All right, cool. Thanks for coming to the August community meeting for workflow. I'm going to talk real quick about the 217 release, which is not out yet, and I'll tell you why. And then I'll talk about future plans and directions, and then we'll just basically take questions. We've got several workflow veteran maintainers here to answer your questions. So the V217 release is supposed to come out today. There's not a lot of stuff in it, as you're probably well aware. We arguably could have just not done a release because there's really literally just a few PRs. But one of them is a Nginx router fix that patched up a whole bunch of CVEs, so it really ought to go out in an official release. We tagged routers separately. If you're actually worried about getting those fixes, you can go ahead and pull down router. I'm going to forget the tag. I think it's 213.1 or something. So we really do need to do a release just based on that. There's a couple other PRs that are updating controller, just bringing all the libraries up to date with bug fixes, bringing all the build packs up to Heroku's current tag versions. Diego's not here, but he had a couple pretty straightforward fixes to the Minio storage layer just to make that more flexible rather than hard coding it. It'd be nice to get those in. Long story short, Jenkins is kind of giving us fits. I had to disable one test for some reason, and I'm just trying to shoehorn those PRs through, and then we'll go ahead and do a release probably later today, maybe tomorrow after I finish integration testing. So that's that for the 217 release. And then the big thing we need to talk about, the elephant in the room, as everybody has been talking about on the community channel, is it's become pretty obvious that we're just not able to devote quite as much time to keeping workflow up to date. And the maintainers just really haven't been able to do more than take a glance at PRs that have been coming in. So we've talked about it for a while, and basically we have a plan to formalize what the status quo is, just so people aren't confused. The plan right now is this. Obviously, we have the 217 release coming out today. There's going to be a 218 release first Thursday of September. And then at that point, we're going to go into maintenance mode. We're going to accept, critical fixes, anything that prevents us from building components, anything that's identified as a serious CVE and needs to be patched, a security issue. Obviously, we'll attend to those, but we're hoping to stick to a 6-month period of we're in maintenance mode at this point. We're only going to accept critical PRs, and then sometime in 2018, around March, we'll stop doing that. We'll say, we're kind of hands off at this point. The source code's always going to be available and stuff, of course. That's not going away, but just we're acknowledging that keeping the CI infrastructure running, maintaining the PRs, attending the PRs, maintaining the code, just keeping things from rusting, as I'm finding out again today, is a lot of work that unfortunately we don't really have allocated right now at Microsoft. We're very interested in pursuing some other stuff I'm going to talk about that at least fills kind of the same niche, but we think they're more Kubernetes native tools, and that's kind of where we want to focus attention from here on out. So just to finish the details of this announcement, unless you guys, unless there's a lot of clamor for it, which I think there isn't, we're probably not going to bother doing another community meeting, but we will obviously be on the community channel indefinitely. As I said, I guess it's September 1st is going to be the 218 release, and that's intended to be the final release, and we'll just be doing patches to that as needed for the following 6 months. I'm going to create a blog post that codifies everything I've been mumbling about here in a nice way that people can read and react to and share around. We'll probably change the readmes for a few strategic projects just so people are aware that we're going to go into a maintenance mode. And then, as I said, in March of next year, the plan is to, we probably won't actually shut it down because I'm not sure there's any need to, but we'll essentially say, hey, we're not responsible for building PRs any longer in CI. And I don't know if Seth or Fisher, you guys want to talk about other projects we're working on, but I want to make it clear that Microsoft is all in on Kubernetes, It's just workflow isn't as strategic as some other things we've been putting a lot more effort into. Obviously, you guys all know Helm. Helm is very important for us, for everybody in the Kubernetes world, and we're still developing that. We started this project you may or may not know about, Draft. I think we've talked about it here before, which kind of takes really some core ideas from workflow, strips them down to essentially just the builder and some core client capabilities, and moves that forward. There's the service catalog stuff that Aaron works on, which is really more enterprisey way of connecting services, something workflow never quite got to, really having a clean service broker implementation other than just set some environment variables. And then some other pieces to kind of flesh out the development picture around all those tools. So that's kind of where our emphasis is going to be going forward. Anyone else want to flesh out what I said there, or do we have any questions about this?
I think if I had to sum up the new direction is we're focusing on a lot of more Unixy style tools that do one thing and do one thing really well. And then you, in theory, could take a lot of those tools and put them all together to make something workflow-ish. So, for example, Draft plus Helm can do a lot. Not everything necessarily, but it could do a lot towards making a workflow-ish style tool. So it's something I'm really excited about.
And as you know, I mean, some of the efforts we've made and really didn't quite have the horsepower to get over the finish line is trying to make workflow more Kubernetes native is something we've been talking about for a while, because it's pretty abstract from the underlying platform. It acts the same way as it did when we were on CoreOS, and that's great, but we want to get a little closer to the metal, and we sort of sidestep that by doing things like Helm and Draft. Kingdom asks, so we have 6 months to get a community of people together to maintain. Yes, that's exactly what we would like to see happen, dude, if possible. We're just acknowledging that we don't unfortunately have the bandwidth even to help with that at this point, but the source code's not going away. If there were an active fork of workflow, we would just buy you beer. We'd be very happy, but but the source code's not going away. So certainly if you're using workflow to run your business and all that, you can maintain a fork, and hopefully other people will gravitate towards it. And bit rot is a real thing. It's just weird when you build so many Docker images and expect them to play with each other nicely. You come back after a few weeks and you find things don't build the same, and it's really frustrating. So it's constant attention. Yep.
Yeah, I'd also just like to add on to that point a little bit, is that we were trying to band together a group of community members who could at least take on the project and maintain it and carry on the project as well, which is sort of why it took so long for us to eventually come into this decision and say that we're just end up liking it. It was just simply that we couldn't find anyone necessarily internally that would be interested in taking on this project and carrying it forward. Or there was internal or not internal interest on doing that forward. So, but yes, essentially, if anyone is willing to take on workflow, as in like take on the infrastructure, take on all that stuff, the documentation and whatnot, we would be more than happy to communicate with people and talk about that kind of stuff too. So, yeah.
For sure, and that's really the trick, is hosting the CI infrastructure is tricky. And one thing I didn't mention in terms of like overall where Microsoft's priorities are in the Kubernetes and container world is something we talked about last week, or something came out just a week or so ago. Amazon container instances.
Azure
we,
container
the former Deis team, are not working directly on that, but that's what's that, Seth?
Azure container instances.
Amazon. Did I say Amazon?
Yeah. I mean,
well, we're going to fix the video in post-production so that I can do my job for the rest of the day.
Just making products for other people.
Anyway, if you're not aware of this, just Google that. It's pretty rad. Containers are first-class instances in the cloud. And this kind of Kubernetes and container native tools, like Aaron was saying, that do one thing really well and are composable and play nice with each other, we feel like that's where things are going. And unfortunately, workflow is somewhat of a monolith in that world, and that's kind of why we got here.
So Boersma, if someone is interested in taking over some or all of workflow as a fork, and they want some advice or direction, how should they go and reach out or go about getting that advice?
The community channel, I think at this point we're planning to keep it alive until the real EOL date, and maybe past that, I don't really know, but at least until March, the community channel will be there, and you can always ping us there or PM us if you really have to. You can always send us email. In terms of the project, ideally, running with the community focus, I think it would have to be a fork is the only thing, because I'm pretty sure some lawyer would get involved if we wanted to actually hand Deis / workflow and all the projects directly over to open source maintainers. I'd love to do that, but I'm sure the lawyers would get in the way. So I think those are the practical concerns. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did for me. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, that's really all I had on the short agenda. After this, I'm going to go back and make sure we get the release done. But there must be some other questions. Go ahead, hit us. You will not hurt our feelings.
One thing I wanted to just quickly bring up about like application deployment. I know there was a couple of people in the community channel that were asking about draft, specifically like draft versus workflow, in the sense of like, if the workflow team is continuing to invest time in draft, is draft going to supersede and eventually become what workflow is? I just wanted to make it clear that it's not going to be like a supersede, or it's not going to be a successor or a successor to workflow. However, one of the things it's supposed to do really well is take an application, bootstrap it, and get it ready to be deployed on top of Kubernetes and do that. And I've been playing around with some of the example applications while we're still kind of like in an alpha state with draft. And I've been managing to install some of the example applications and that kind of stuff on top of draft. So if you're interested in just simply the deployment side of things, as in getting the application, deploying it as a Docker image, and deploying it on top of Kubernetes, that is still available, and that kind of thing is still inside draft. So I just wanted to point that out a little bit, for sure.
Yeah, it's obviously not a replacement. It fits a much smaller niche, but we do, I think, envision a time where there's a bunch of tools around draft that will, accomplish something similar to what workflow does.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things that are missing in the stack, like say, workflow comes a lot with, like, say, the router, it comes with the monitoring stack, it comes with the logging stack and all that. I could definitely imagine a time where we have documentation around draft to say that this is how you can get it set up with an Ingress controller, which we're doing today with a lot of our example applications. This is how you tie in like a centralized logging system into the draft containers that are being deployed there, monitoring solutions and whatnot on top of Kubernetes and all that. Is there an estimate for when draft will reach a stable version? I don't have an answer for that yet. We had an offsite about 2 weeks ago in Boulder, Colorado, just for all of us to get together and kind of solidify what we want to do for a 1.0 timeline. And so we've listed out a bunch of issues that if you look on github.com/Azure Draft, you can look on there for all of the issues and whatnot. But we don't have a specific we don't have a specific date to say when we're going to be stable. So, yeah, that's all.
What Fisher is saying is help us get to stable faster.
Yes.
It's open source, yo. Yeah, and if you're wondering, well, okay, that's draft sounds cool, but how do I migrate from workflow to this new world you guys are mumbling about? We're not actually planning a specific migration plan in terms of like a tool like we did have tools to help you migrate from workflow version 1 or Deis version 1 to workflow version 2. I don't think we're planning on that right now. We're just hoping to do what Fisher said, which is write good documentation about here's what Draft, Helm, other tools offer, and flesh that out to the point where it describes at least a similar story to the workflow world. And then you can see how you can move to it. But in terms of a migration tool, that's not in the cards at this point. Just to get that out there.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to say pull the entire database records from your database and start migrating that immediately over to like Draft or something like that. Unfortunately, that's not going to be possible.
Unless someone wants to write some killer PR, but that sounds like a lot of work to me. Let me just look at my doc real quick to make sure there wasn't anything else I wanted to bring up. Yeah, and I guess we didn't say specifically, but if you are interested in Draft and some of these other tools, we talk about those over the Kubernetes Slack, kubernetes.slack.io. I think there's a Draft users channel. There's a few Helm channels. There's some other topics that'll probably pop up. Yeah, that's all I had. Any other questions or comments? Cool. All right. Well, so my plan is basically I have a blog post that I didn't want to put out there yet because I want to tell you guys first here. But it will codify everything I talked about. We'll merge that to deis.com and maybe publicize it elsewhere so people are well aware of this plan. I'll put it back in the community channel. And should I avoid using Deis scale? Oh, hey, Leo. Yeah, maybe if you're running into those errors. We were just talking about this issue he pointed out that I finally got around to looking at this morning. I guess so. If you're running into that error, I'm surprised we didn't trigger that before, but it doesn't look like a super difficult fix if you're up for it. Otherwise, I can give it a try. All right, let's call it good for this one, which may be the last one. Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at your PR if you can give it a shot. All right, we'll talk to you in the community channel and keep an eye out for the follow-up documentation to this. Thanks, gang.